In this step, we'll use the installer app to functionally test the system and verify that it's able to operate as it should. In this step, we'll verify proper IQ gateway wiring, check and verify system metering, both production and consumption, and verify PV, system controller, and battery are operating correctly. To begin this step, access the customer site in the Enphase installer app. Tap the validation stage on the screen. Next, ensure you are connected to the IQ gateway with your mobile device installed with the latest Enphase installer app. The validation step involves 4 sub-steps that we'll cover one at a time. The first step is checking and validating microinverter production in the system, which is an optional step. The second is checking and verifying the IQ gateway in the backup system is wired to the right place for power, which is critical for proper system operations. The next sub-step in this sequence is configuring and enabling the system metering. Next, checking and loading base level operating software. And finally, functional validation, which will walk you through the test sequence to verify that the system is working as it should. In this video, we'll skip the microinverter validation step, as that will be covered in a different video. The IQ gateway wiring check. This step checks for proper wiring of the IQ gateway. Tap on the IQ gateway wiring check to start the automated test process. The IQ gateway power wiring is different for different systems depending if you're installing IQ8 microinverters or IQ7 microinverters. The IQ gateway wiring sub-step will check and confirm if you have the IQ gateway wired into the right place for power for the system you installed. If the IQ gateway power is wired incorrectly, the IQ gateway will reboot during the test. If this happens, check that the IQ gateway power is correctly wired into the system controller. When this test finishes, it will show the sub-step as completed and you can move to the next sub-step. Meter configuration. Configuring the meters is critical for proper operation of the IQ batteries. In this sub-step, we'll configure and verify the production meter, consumption meter, and storage meter if the system has them installed. Tap Meter Configuration on the installer app. We'll configure the production meter first. It's strongly recommended that you follow the wizard steps to enable the production meter. I'll tap Yes. To start the production meter configuration, the system must be energized and the PV circuits should be switched on for at least 5 minutes when they should be producing power. Click the checkbox to verify the PV has been on for 5 minutes. You'll see the current power production value on the screen. To begin the wizard, when the power production numbers have stabilized, switch off the PV breakers in the IQ combiner to turn off power. It's important that you do not turn off the breakers in the IQ system controller for this. Check the box when you've switched off your breakers. After switching off all of the PV breakers in your AC combiner box or your PV subpanel, the PV production should drop to 0. This verifies the CTs are measuring production and nothing else is being measured through the CT. If you are reading something other than 0, check your PV circuit wiring and ensure PV output wires are the only ones going through the production CT. Enable the production meter by tapping the button on the screen. Configuring and enabling the consumption meter. Tap consumption meter to configure it. A pop-up will remind you the consumption CTs cannot be installed on the load side of the MID. Check and confirm the CTs are not installed on the load side of the system controller. Click and select the diagram that reflects how your system is configured and where the consumption CTs are located. In this system, as an example, it's a whole home backup with the CTs on the main feeders between the utility meter and the system controller. Answer the pop-up question based on your system configuration. The Setup Consumption Meter screen will show the total home loads. This is how much the entire home is consuming. To begin the consumption meter validation, PV must be turned off by turning off the breakers inside the AC combiner box or the PV subpanel. Check the box when you've switched off all your breakers. With the PV turned off, the meter readings in the installer app are showing just the current consumption of the home. Now turn on a load with a known wattage, such as a 1200 watt hairdryer. Tap Next. We are asked if the total home load now increased by the amount expected of the added load. If no, try the test again. If yes, tap Yes to continue. Phase errors are a common installation error, which, if unchecked, could cause the system to operate incorrectly or erratically. Installers should perform a phase check for L1 and L2 to ensure consistent phasing from the main panel to the IQ gateway. The diagram pop-up shows how to check for proper phasing. Confirm you have done this by tapping Confirm. With the PV still turned off, the net power being imported from the grid will show on the screen. For the next step, turn on the PV breakers to start PV power production. Tap the Switch on PV breakers message to begin the timer to show how long before PV starts production. If the loads in the home remain relatively constant, the import number will drop as PV starts producing to help feed the loads. If PV is producing more than there are loads, the message will switch from power being imported to displaying how much power is being exported to the grid. This confirms the operation of the consumption CTs. Tap Next to continue. There is one last installer test to check if the consumption meter is running correctly. If the home has a utility meter that shows power flow, kilowatts, in and out of the meter, you can verify if the home's utility power meter readings matches the reading you see on the installer app. If the consumption readings look good, tap Enable Consumption Meter to complete the meter setup. Click Continue to configure the storage meter if there's one installed and is required for the storage system. To begin the storage meter configuration, ensure the PV is switched on and the IQ batteries have been on for at least 5 minutes. The storage meter measures charge and discharge from the battery circuits using a separate CT placed around the battery circuit conductors. Verify if the batteries are pulsing blue and the installer app indicates storage discharging. Or if the batteries are pulsing green, the installer app indicates storage charging. If the behavior doesn't match, check the storage CT wiring and verify all battery circuits are being measured through the storage CT. Tap Next to continue and tap Enable Storage Meter to complete this sub-step. The last step of system validation is the final system functional test. The installer app should display that all meters are operating and displaying values. Once the meters have been enabled, the functional validation sub-step is the last final operational test of the whole system. Functional validation begins by showing a live status screen which displays where power is coming from and going to. In this example, PV is producing and exporting to the utility grid. PV is also charging the batteries and also supplying power to the home and loads. At this time, there's no power being imported from the grid. The functional validation test checks that Enphase system devices are ready, all the meters are enabled, and the battery mode is set up for functional testing. After testing, batteries will be reconfigured for normal operation. The next step in functional validation is ensuring there are some active loads in the backup panel and confirm that the batteries are charging. For this part of the test, we want to ensure that the loads in the backup panel is less than the battery capacity so that when we disconnect from the utility in the test, the batteries will handle the load and not collapse the microgrid. When you're ready, go off-grid by using the toggle in the installer app at the top right of the screen. The system will disconnect from the utility, PV will continue to produce power, and with batteries will supply power to the backup loads. There should be no interruption of the running loads. Verify this was successful by tapping and confirming the system is off-grid and backup loads remain powered. Next, turn on an additional load and allow the load to stabilize for a minute. Verify that the system was able to support the additional load. Tap the box to continue. The next functional test step is to reconnect the system to the utility grid and have the system resync and operate back with the grid. Using the on-grid toggle at the top of the screen, tap it and wait for the system to reconnect to the grid. The final functional validation step is to confirm that the system transitioned back to an on-grid state. You will receive a functional validation is complete message. Then you can tap Continue to finish. After functional validation is completed, the Enphase system will schedule and complete any remaining software updates to the system unattended. The installer can leave the site. System is now fully validated and functionally tested, and you can complete any final commissioning steps.